IVM.
The Cred Cheer Days is a new offer that is giving you an opportunity to be a millionaire. There's 100 crores worth of rewards and cashbacks on offer for Cred members on the Cred app from today to Jan 2nd, 2022. All you have to do is refer the app to a friend. The more you refer, the better your chances get. Like when you refer the Cred app for the first time, you get a cool 750 bucks, but you also get the chance to earn an additional 10,000 rupees. And when you refer for the second time, you again get your 750 bucks and also stand to win a whopping 1 lakh rupees. And if you make it through so far, go on and refer it for a third time to get the chance to earn up to 10 lakh rupees. Cred Cheer Days and its crazy rewards are on from today to Jan 2nd. Download the Cred app now. Folks, welcome to Paisa Vaisa, brought to you by Cred, the most rewarding credit card bill payments app. I'm your host, Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter. And today's episode, guys, this is why I love doing my podcast. It's a really important topic. Of course, not a topic that's connected with personal finance, stuff like mutual funds and all. But this is about the informal labor sector. I'll tell you, this is one of the biggest things that India needs to get right. And I'm pretty sure that you'll connect to this, right? It has to do with upskilling, education, and opportunities for India's informal labor. And we'll get into numbers. You'll be surprised how large that is. It's an extremely important topic and deeply connected with how our economy does. And believe me, you can make a difference out here too. We'll tell you how to do that on this episode. My guest, Gayatri Vasudevan, CEO, LaborNet. We're going to talk about the challenges and opportunities in India's huge informal labor market and how that makes an impact on you right after this Cred convenience break.
$100. That's all it takes to begin your journey with Bitcoin and Ethereum. No, really. With CoinSwitch, you can start investing in over 100 cryptocurrencies with just 100 rupees. On top of that, there are zero charges for deposits and withdrawals, so you can trade, buy, sell, however and whenever you want. All of this, plus their extremely intuitive interface, makes CoinSwitch the perfect app for beginners in the crypto space. But don't take my word for it. Just download CoinSwitch for free and try it out for yourself. If you'd like more information on cryptocurrencies, tune into a show about crypto with me, Rohan Joshi, my new adventure on IVM podcasts. CoinSwitch, kuch to badlega.
Gayatri, welcome to Paisa Vaisa. Thank you so much for doing this for our listeners. A brief introduction for our listeners to what LaborNet does. We'll go into detail in the second half.
Thank you, Anupam, for inviting me. And LaborNet is actually, one could say it's two entities. Entity number one looks at how do you give full-time wages. That means with Social Security, anybody who gets a monthly wage with PF and an ESI is a formal worker. So we're trying to get people into the formal work stream, which is part of what LaborNet does. And the second part of it is how do you get regular work, which is also. So LaborNet really does what we call Sahi work. So Sahi work, as you would assume, is right work. We want people to get regular work. We want people to get monthly wage. We want them to get Social Security. The other entity, which is also part of LaborNet, which is the Sambhav Foundation, looks at all the support that a person needs to get to this point, which means how do you skill, upskill, reskill, duration that is needed, because there is 80% of our population who does not have any certification. That means they finished 10th standard, don't have any certification. And these are not aliens, these are everyday people. So they are your drivers, they are your plumbers, your electricians, your beauticians. So range of people who touch our lives every single day are people who need to actually move to certification, because that's the only way for them to get into two streams. One is the wage stream. The second is the Social Security stream. That means how do they get connected to financial institutions, etc. So that's what Sambhav Foundation, part of LaborNet, does, is facilitate people to move to formal sector.
Yeah. Gayatri, please tell us about yourself. I read your profile and my God, it's fascinating. I mean, you could have gone one of, I don't know how many ways. You could have done whatever you wanted in life, the kind of background idea, why, so just tell our listeners a little bit about you. I mean, you've traveled to what? I mean, the most remotest parts of India, and you've done a lot of work out there. Can you just tell our listeners something about your background and what made you start LaborNet?
So, I wanted to be a development professional right from the beginning. So I finished my, like most people in their 20s, which is decades back. So I sort of finished my undergrad in Delhi, and as my what should I say, luck would have it, I got involved in the NSS program, the National Social Service program, and got tremendously influenced by that. After that, I decided to do my post graduation in social work in Mumbai, and then decided to, as you said, live in a couple of in villages, because I had visions of improving conditions there. Post that, I joined the ILO and spent about 8 years in ILO formally, and 2 years more like a consultant. And that period was really an awakening for me. I realized my first stint as a researcher come activist living in a village didn't satisfy certain things that I needed from a macro perspective. In ILO, it gives me a macro perspective, but I knew that I wasn't able to address through state systems alone several issues, and therefore LabourNet. So the idea was that, the reason why people cannot move to, let's say, there is people and other people. So we are all, it's just a lottery where you're born. So we're all lucky to move to the other people, and the real people are unlucky to be where they are. So we believe that if you give the support system, then they are able to reach where the other people, which is you and me, are. So that's what LabourNet is about, creating capacity, creating an environment to help people reach to, they may not get a full-time wage, but at least they need to have all the other support systems which mimic a full-time wage.
Just amazing, right? Because after ILO, you could have just gone into, I don't know, lobbying, think tanks, and just ensconce yourself in Delhi. But I'm really impressed. I mean, it's an honor to have a guest like you who does such deep work in this very important sector. So I want to go back to your answer that at the start where you spoke about informal labor. Let's go deep in that, right? Because you mentioned that 80% of India's labor force is in the informal sector. It's got absolutely no recurring salaries 12 months of the year. It's got no provident fund. It's got no safety nets, right? And a lot of us want to talk about it as a gig economy or whatever, but it's a very diverse space, right? It could be your drivers, it could be maids, it could be someone working at a shop, right? These people are all informal labor. I want you to just tell our listeners about the challenges that this very large labor force that's critical to India, what are the challenges that they face? You touched upon them in the start. Let's go into detail about them.
So, I think the last year is the best year to actually discuss it. It's sort of thrown it in our face. Let's take an informal sector. Those who are in the formal sector will get a monthly wage come what may. They can be laid off, but they will get a monthly wage till they're laid off, right? But in the informal sector, you have to find work every day. And again, let's just look at all the people, as you rightly said, who touch our lives every day. Take the dhobi, take a domestic worker, take a electrician, take a plumber, I'm not even taking agricultural workers for a minute, I'm just parking that because that's very complex. I'm taking service sector to make it simpler. All of these people have one single thing which binds them together and puts them in that informal category, which is that there is no, as you said, monthly wage. That means I go out, I work today, I earn. So if I don't work 25 days a month, my wage goes down. Point number one. Point number two is there is no planning for the future, which means that they have to, whatever they earn is not only for today, they need to plan. There is nobody else, there's no instrument itself which looks at savings for the future. And as you would appreciate, most of this is manual labor. And therefore, there is a time, I often think they're like, sports people or artists, they have a finite time because how much can your body really work when you're older? Which means that you need to make as much as soon as possible because you're not going to be able to make faster. The third is they don't have any health cover at all. So if you're sick, that's the single thing which will bring you. The next is a little bit more nebulous, is the houses they live in. Mostly it will be what we would call a slum or a jhopatpatti if you're in an urban area. If it's in a rural area, it will be in a hamlet, but not in the main panchayat village. And the land is often not their own. So that will be illegal or rented apartment in illegal localities. So that's what differentiates it in very simple terms.
You mentioned agri and you put that on the side saying it's too complex. Tell us.
Okay, so people often think of agricultural workers as one segment, and there's a very romanticized view. Hare bhare fields are there, people are running around, and people are earning, right? But the reality is that most people have very small land holdings. So it is not able to take, especially in India. I'm not saying everywhere in the world. In India, this is a fact. So people have one person alone, one adult is what that land can at best employ. So the remaining actually move to the city. Whether it is a metro city, smaller city, today the urbanization in India is very high, right? They could move to, from a village to Jabalpur as a city, or Dharwad as a city, or Tiruvannamalai as a city, any of these cities they will move to. The remaining, who remains in the village in that case? It's the old, the infirm, and the women. So that it's become so feminized. Indian agriculture has actually become feminized, but the land holding is in the name of the family. So it's the male members of the land who own it. The people who work it are largely the old, infirm, and the women. And they don't have access to the incomes there. So it becomes a family in-kind income, and to the extent that it is sold. So that's agricultural landholders. These are micro and small landholders. I'm again referring to the poorer segment. I'm not talking of the large landholding. And then you have the labor, So state after state, if you see, the labor who comes for paddy sowing, paddy, cotton picking, you can just name it, it can be in cash crops like rubber, coffee, pepper. It can be in staples like paddy. It can be in cotton picking. It can be in sugarcane. Actually comes from outside. So they mostly are people who are not from the village, who come at a point of time and pick and go, just like any other casual labor. So they are agricultural labor, and most of the agricultural labor have another side of their life, which is the construction labor. So they function as agricultural labor, they function as construction labor. So what you would in common parlance in Hindi you would refer as dehadi. It can be any dehadi. It doesn't matter. So that's why it's complex, because who earns, who owns, and how does the money get divided is between kind, cash, is complex.
It is very complex, and I'm just there's a lot of, I think, lack of knowledge about this, which is why I'm glad that we're talking about it. So now let's get to the solution part, Gayatri. Two questions, okay? First, what does formalizing of informal labor mean, right? And second, why is formalizing even important for both sides on the table, for the informal worker and for his prospective employer?
So to me, and many of us who believe that it's important, is that if you do not plan for the future, you actually have a drag on the economy. Forget the individual. As I said, the individual drag is a reality, right? But look at the society. Who is going to support? Suppose I am the informal labor, right? Like, let me take myself and assume that I'm a beautician. So I want to sort of take a nice, let's say, a friendly occupation. I don't want to take what we don't like as an occupation. What happens when I'm not able to bend anymore and do your pedicure, manicure, your facial, whatever, because it's heavy on the body, right? So assume I become 45. Then what of me? What kind of work can I do? Because I've been skilled in the single sector. If I fall sick, only my children have to look after me. My children most probably are also in the informal sector. My daughter is a domestic worker, or maybe a gig worker nowadays who's a delivery, is what my son is doing. And I'm genderizing it consciously because you don't see many delivery girls, right? You only see delivery boys. So if this is the case, who's going to take care of me? State? Is the health system good enough to take care of so many people? Who's going to pay for it? I think that's the question one needs to answer. Second is, where do I live? What do I eat? It all is going to come back to us as an economy. Therefore, it is very important, even if employer, you see, because many of these people don't have a single employer. So let's take a sector like construction, right? 10% of India's labor force works in construction. And if 10% of the labor force works in construction and 10% is what it contributes to GDP, real estate, contributes to GDP, you're talking of 10% of active workforce, which is going to be becoming ineffective. That means they're not able to work. They don't have the social security. Then the question really is who pays? It's taxpayers who will pay at some point. Somebody has to take care. You can't leave a population left, and that I think is the biggest issue. So therefore, instruments, if it doesn't come from the employer, because there is no single employer, one needs to look at what other instruments are possible, how can we actually mimic it. So can we create, like yesterday I was listening to interesting things called community health insurance. So without a TPA insurance provider, can we actually have community health insurance? Can we have similar savings bankings that are available? Because we need to create it. The time is absolutely right where we can't walk away from roti kapda makan for those who don't have it after a point.
Yeah, I mean, just this is it. It's something that's so critical to our labor force, right? We like to talk about demographic dividends for India, and the stock market keeps on going up and whatnot. And I'm pretty sure that the entire labor force employed by all our listed companies would hardly be anything. I think
Absolutely.
TCS is the largest employer, and it's because of obvious reasons. Probably Reliance is next. But you spoke about gig economy in your previous answer, right? And we know the gig economy is growing by leaps and bounds, and we've also had controversies over the living conditions of them, which is probably a good thing because it's high time we start having that kind of discussion. Tell me your views on that, Gayatri. The gig economy, labor out there, what are the challenges and opportunities for the informal labor in this sector? I guess I'm talking about what? The Ubers and the Urban Claps and the Zomatos and the Swiggies.
So, Arupam, I'm actually very confused on that. So, I want to admit that starting out.
Okay.
Because India has always had a very outsourced economy, right? And I sometimes feel because of this conversation on gig, as you rightly said, it's there in front of us, right? We're discussing this issue. Tell me, when did we discuss it? Prior to 5 years back, we didn't even talk about them. They didn't even matter. But thanks to the Ubers and the Zomatos and whatever, the Swiggies, now you're talking of the gig economy, which means you're talking of this workforce which is quote unquote off rule. It's not on your rules. It's not on anybody's rules. So we are talking about it. So to that extent, I'm very happy. I'm also very happy that we are thinking social security. Otherwise, it never even mattered to us. So I feel that while we may vilify, they have brought it to the dining table. And if they brought it to the dining table, I would like to really engage with them and see, can we structure it properly? I mean, it's not like outsourced work is not been there in India, right? Piece rate, we used to call it. So, so many buttons stitched, so many zips done. A classic, actually, even better one is jo aapko anaj lata hai, the hamalis who bring it are always paid by the number of bags. So, and those bags are huge, 25 kgs, 10 kgs, they pick up on their bags. And this is the one which brings rice, paddy, etc. to your warehouses before gig. I'm saying this is all in the traditional everyday economy. So, in that sense, I do feel that a legal cover will come because people have become a little more aware. And this is because these companies have sort of raised so much money that everybody feels, are they exploiting? But the point I think is that these systems, piece rate system was always there. So the piece rate system was never recognized. It never had any intervention. So now I think with all of us talking about it, we will think of solutions. And that's why I'm confused, right? Should we say gig is bad? Well, it's always been there. Piece rate has been the maximum paymaster. From your chicken curry work, the person who did, to your buttons who sewed, to your zips, the person who did, everything was piece rate. In construction, your houses you construct, piece rate. Paint ko you say per square feet, I'll do it per tonnage, whatever, hamalis, as I said. So to that extent, I want to say that I'm upbeat.
Yeah, of course, these are very important conversations that need to be had. I mean, this country needs to generate crore jobs per year. I think 10 million is the number. That's the kind of run rate that we need to, and those are jobs. Anyway, for last question before we go into the break, I think let's talk about plugging gaps, right? There are gaps in education, gaps in employment, gaps even in entrepreneurship, right? And formalizing informal labor can actually help? I mean, there is a role out here. How do these pieces fit in the bigger picture?
So let me start with entrepreneurship. It's one of these strange things. For the educated, you have accelerators, you have incubators, you have chances of failures, even if it is socially, there's a little bit of stigma or maybe a lot of stigma, you have them. But for the self employed, every day is entrepreneurial for the micro entrepreneur. But we'd like to put them into that self employed category. A person who's self employed has to be very entrepreneurial because they have to go and look for work every day or in periods which are like less than a month. So I feel we need to create an ecosystem to build that spirit in them, and that should happen right from the school. The financial instruments are just not supportive of that. For example, have you heard of a VC who is doing it at 10,000 to 50,000? No, it's debt there, right? For the poor, it's only debt. So you borrow to try out an entrepreneurial idea if you're poor. If you're educated, you have opportunity. So I think on the entrepreneur side, according to me, the biggest intervention which is needed is flexible money, which is going to test the ideas that they have and not put them into a debt trap. Second, as you said, is is those who are daily wage workers who are paid on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, but are informal. So this is your Kirana shop person, for example. He or she is paid on a monthly basis, but they don't fall into any economy. So there, I think the key is looking at upskilling and reskilling. So if you look at it, how should a Kirana store be? What should it look like? How should storage happen there? How do they read discounts? How do they get? So these are all tremendous digital, both literacy, numerical literacy and digital literacy, which needs to come in to push them within Kirana stores to a higher order, because you can do multiple things thanks to technology today, as well as earn better.
Yeah.
And there is a whole host of people who are in this category. That means they get paid, but not get paid in a formal manner. The third is in the MSME sector. MSME sector employs a lot of people, but it is, if there's an English word, it is pygmyized. It's kept small because of other reasons. It has nothing to do with the worker. It is more to do with the interaction with the laws and legal. So how do we get them out of that to get them to be larger so that they can formalize? And I do believe that's a huge segment if we are able to move that juggernaut even a little bit. And the last is on the education. Again, the last year has shown us the divide between the poor and the rich, right? If you did not have data connectivity, if you did not have device, like for example, in LaborNet, one of the things we're struggling and every day talking about is $499 ka package hai ki $399 ka package hai. Will they be able to download a virtual class or a self-learning class? So how do you really engage with them to continuously learn? When we say today, if you looked at any workforce reports, they will say that continuous learning is a must in the next 30 years.
Yeah.
And they have been disadvantaged as they start. They just get left behind. So every year that you leave them behind and don't bring them into this continuous learning, which you and I have an opportunity for, is a disservice. Again, as I'm saying, it's not the individual alone. It's the economy which gets pulled. It is you and I who get pulled because that from the neighboring slum or the neighboring village, the person could not go through education and certification and therefore could not get into or find ways to mimic a formal economy, get their health insurance, get their social security, regularity of wage. They're not able to do it, they fall back. So that poverty trap becomes huge. So that's really what, to me, formalizing is. It's not necessarily one employer giving the wage.
All that you said is tweaks in regulation, right? At the state level, at the central level. It's not like you're talking about something that requires 1991 type reform and a crisis and stuff like that. And the sheer amount of people that are affected by this. Okay, folks, sorry. I know that I'm taking a lot of time today and I'm talking a lot because, believe me, it's a subject that I deeply believe in. This is the difference between India, whatever $1 trillion economy and 8% growth versus probably higher. Anyway, so we'll just take a small break. We'll take a credit convenience break right now. On the other side, we're going to dive into what LaborNet is about. Like I said, my guest, Gayatri Vasudevan, CEO LaborNet. Folks, we'll be right back.
Remember the days when our granny used to narrate once upon a time stories? Let's bring back the good old days of moral stories with Storytime Tamil. Hi, I am Ravishankar Balachandran, host of Storytime Tamil podcast. I would like you to entertain and educate your children with stories from Storytime Tamil. Tune in to the new episode sharp at 7 p.m. every day on IVM website, IVM podcast app, YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcast from.
And welcome back to this really special episode of Paisa Vaisa. Gayatri, okay, tell us about LaborNet. When was it formed? You got an association with the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. Super strong backers, I guess. Tell us about that.
So, LaborNet was formed in 2008. As you rightly said, Michael Susan Dell Foundation is our impact investor. So, there are a set of investors, who are called impact investors. So, we luckily have angels also who are impact investors, as well as 3 very credible institutions.
You don't have a massive VC writing $100 million checks to you every quarter.
I wish, but no. I think what is very nice about investors such as Michael Susan Dell Foundation is they are very long-term investors. They give space and time, and they look at multiple financial instruments also. So while they may have initially put equity when we were having a slightly tough time, they were looking at the way in which we could access debt. So they had a debt instrument which they brought in during the COVID times to our not-for-profit Sambhav Foundation. They did a grant. So there's a variety other than technical expertise that they bring in. And I'll tell you why it's important is even in social enterprises, while India doesn't have a very defined way of calling a social enterprise, it doesn't. So these entities, because we work with very thin margins, we are looking at sustainability. We don't want to be completely grant funded all the time. See, there's an arm of us which will have to work with grant funds, but the other arm cannot work with grant funds. We need to create sustainability. You need very flexible and a multitude of financial instruments to make that happen. So Michael and Susan Dell Foundation first invested in us in 2013, and they have continued to be one of the most supportive investors that we've had.
Okay. I saw your website, and your website states that you target corporate, educational institutions, government, and individuals. Walk us through each of, because all 4 of them are quite interesting. How do you do this?
So let me take corporate first. So there are companies. Okay, let me take a concrete example, right? Like, for example, if they are fabricator companies, fabricators are on aluminum. In all the big high-rise buildings, you have the aluminum windows are all done by fabricators. So there are companies which sell, these pipes, aluminum pipes, and they need fabricators. For them, they are their market influencers. But for us, they are informal sector workers. So we look at skilling and reskilling them. Now, let me take a example closer to home. Let's take a plumber. What is your biggest complaint with a plumber? Usne aake kiya, par I bought a Jaguar tap and kharab karke chala gaya. So this will be, you say the guy just doesn't have the skills to do it, has never been certified. So what we do is we try to engage with corporates and get the real and most relevant product training through them, the content through them, and then we deliver it. So all of them are not still onto the digital platforms, So they need physical. So we bring them together. We certify them using the government certification systems. So we try to bring them in so that if they get a government certification, they can then use it for other identity purposes for social security. So that's with corporate. Now with educational institutions is we in 2013-14, we were working very closely with the government to bring in vocational training into schools. So today we work with about 50,000 students. We have deployed about 400 teachers. So instead of a third language, India has a 3-language policy. That means you do English, Hindi, and Kannada or Marathi or Punjabi or Urdu or Sanskrit or whatever. Instead of the third language, a child can take a vocational subject. So in government schools, we have introduced it as a board subject. So we deploy the teachers to do it. Similarly, with colleges, we have 12 colleges in which we are running BWalk programs. The idea is to create employable adolescents who will become young people who can decide whether to do graduation, but have the choice of actually having a skill even before they hit the labor market at 18. Then was government. So government, our relationship has been more with National Skill Development Corporation in Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship to look to see can we create, transferable credit-based certification. Which means that currently, for example, one of my pet projects we are looking at is vaccinators and community mobilizers, right? They're already nurses, dentists. By Ministry of Health's guidelines, a pharmacist, a dentist, a nurse, an auxiliary nurse, midwife can all vaccinate, they can inoculate. But pre-COVID, they may have all done maybe 20 inoculations in a month.
Yeah.
Now they have to look at the scale they have to do. So we've been working with the Health Sector Skill Council and National Skill Development Corporation to look to see can we actually train them to ensure better speed of vaccination. That means declutter the role. What can be done by somebody else? Data entry can be done by somebody else. Community mobilization can be done. So they have more time, they can focus, somebody else cleans it. So we sort of created it think of it like a marriage hall, right?
Yeah, no,
So
I was thinking of the Anganwadi workers and their, who are the PHCs for the Pulse Polio program. I was thinking on those lines, but I get what you're
Pulse
saying.
Polio, you see, is
Well,
oral.
yeah,
Here you
doesn't
have
require,
to
jab.
intravenous, right?
That's why they call it jab.
And so therefore, it's not everybody who can just very easily do it. It's not complicated, but they have done it, but they need to speed up.
Sure.
So we launched that training program. That's with government, work with them to create credible certification, which can be transferable from a credit perspective. And from individuals' perspective, we're constantly trying to engage with individuals on two forms. One is our not-for-profit Sambhav Foundation to come in with cash in kind and be part of our sort of movement in a sense. The other thing that I really think with individuals, which we haven't really done, but we would really like to do, is communicate with them and explain, just like you're doing, Anupam, like you gave us an opportunity to say these are not people out of the world. You're dealing with them day in, day out, every day. And they are the majority of people you're dealing with, from your Kamwali Bai to your Dhobi to your electrician and plumber, whoever, you're dealing with them every day. So can we really look at creating community-based movements to look at, their stability?
So I'm getting into that right now, right? Because now I'm going to come, my next questions, the last two questions, in fact, are from a listener perspective. Because I get this a lot in my conversations on the forums where I'm at. A lot of discussion happens on this, right? Some of us who are sensitive enough can see that informal labor is in distress and want to do something, especially in the pandemic. We want to help in some way or the other. So my question to you is, what's the best way for me, for us, or for whoever, to help informal labor make a sustainable living, and there is a second part of this question about how people can reach out to you. But first, let's get into that. Tell me how the listeners can actually make a difference. Like you said, this outreach that you're talking about.
So, Anupam, for a minute, let's spark LaborNet, okay? And let's just say you want to do something. In my opinion, there are lots and lots of ways. The first I would say is, have you thought of creating a recurring deposit for them? It's a simple instrument. There are multiple companies, even in the fintech world, which are looking at savings for the informal sector. So assuming you pay somebody, let's just simplify life, right? Say I'm dealing with 10 informal sector workers. So, and let's name them just for simplicity's sake. The security guard of my apartment complex, the domestic worker who comes and makes my roti or cleans my house, the dhobi who comes and collects the clothes, and then I call, normally the electrician or the plumber or a mason or somebody who comes. Let's take these category, which is an everyday dealing for me, right? In a month, I must be dealing with them every day or at least once or twice a month. For these people, I think we should see and encourage them to look at financial portals, if not yourself with an RD. A simple RD also will do, in my opinion, to say, okay, if I'm giving you this or if you've earned this, can you put it in this instrument? I think that would be very, very important. The next that I would say is look at health insurances. Today, there is a lot of government health insurance also. Engage with the government health insurance, however you trust or don't trust. See whether they can be part. Suppose you are giving them a monthly wage. Nothing prevents you to actually register them in ESI. There is a method which is there and one can facilitate it. Then you have so health savings. These are two. The savings can be for future and savings can be for education. Typically, you will find people borrow at June when they say school ka fees pay karna hai. Because they put them in low cost, affordable education. So we should look to see for education separately and for future separately. And the last, which I'm increasingly feeling is important, is bring them into the digital world. Every time you say this laptop is bad or this phone of yours is bad, think they need the best equipment. So when you're buying your Diwali gift, you may want to actually consider one Diwali gift, which is an digital Diwali gift with a data pack. These are very important because continuous learning is very, very important. For the agricultural workers who we don't see at all, right? To anybody in the village who's far away from me, somebody who cleans the street is not somebody I'm going to register with. I think there possibly one needs to think through, but today there are many platforms which allow you to do. And I can at least name 3 platforms that I am aware of. You
Please
have the
tell
Give
us.
India, you have Milap, you have Keto. These are 3 big platforms we can engage with. And these platforms, what they do is they connect you to organizations which can further take that forward. So I think those are ways I would say are important to engage.
I had a conversation with a few of my friends who asked me, Acha, tell us, I want my maid to start an SIP. And, I was like, does she have health insurance? Nahi, wo pata nahi. And I was like, guys, what are you even thinking out here? I mean, I get that mutual funds are important and this and that, but I'm going to recap for our listeners what you said. Recurring deposit, lovely instrument at a bank, simple to execute, small amounts each and every month. Remember, interest compounds on that. Second, health insurance, right? And that is something that even the government provides. You can look at the central government schemes that are there. And third is the digital thing. Could be a laptop, could be a mobile phone, folks. That is how you help the informal labor that touches your lives. And like Gayatri said, there are probably 10 of them, if not more, that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Okay. Last couple of questions, Gayatri. Some of our listeners, startup founders, MSME owners, what can they do to engage informal labor in a more meaningful way, right? So I don't know, if they're looking out for labor, should they reach out to you? What can they do?
Absolutely. I mean, one is, reach out to companies like ours where we would ensure PF, ESI at least as a minimum. Ensure that they pay on the first of the day month so that the worker can be paid on the 7th of the day. If you're MSME owners or startup, I would say another thing one can engage is look at where they stay. Don't walk away from it, very recently, we are doing a project where we looked at a construction site, what should an interior look like? We always talk of our interiors, right? What should an interior look for where there are bunk beds, where people sleep together? What kind of toilets should they have? What kind of kitchen facilities should they have? What kind of water should they have? What kind of energy should they have? So I think it's possible for MSME, particularly MSME, their manufacturing, to look at where they're staying. Their labor is always staying in what they call PGs, but these
I think you're being very charitable with that PG word.
Yeah. So absolutely, Anupam. So I think we should look at all of these things and see, create a form of better living conditions. I am firmly of the belief if living conditions are better, they will not fall so sick. There will not be so much absenteeism. So I think it's in their benefit to look at these elements other than simply putting them with third-party aggregators like ours and say, payroll them.
Very interesting, right? I mean, I'm guessing that this would also ensure that they don't leave the organization, because if you're giving them housing or at least, helping them out, if you're giving them health insurance, and in the US, for example, health insurance is part of the package, wouldn't that also make the informal labor stick with you for a longer time? I mean, why is a government job so important, right? People love government jobs because you get you probably get a house with it, you get security with it. Why can't the private sector do that?
So Anupam, I'm a bit divided like the gig there. So I'll be honest with you. I have all the software. I have a son who's 22. He's just got into the labor market, and I see all of these youngsters talking about 2 years, 3 years, and they'll move, and we consider it okay, right? So it's not like he's got PF, he's got ESI, he's in a formal job, etc. So what I mean by it is, in today's world, being in one entity forever may not be the dream even. So for the poor, why should it be? So we shouldn't hold it back, but the overall status improves, right?
Sure,
You're not going to get dengue because their environment looks bad. You're getting dengue because there's water stagnating in your neighborhood, boss. So what are we talking about?
Yeah.
So I think that's what
Sure.
I mean.
Okay, last question. I just realized, I don't know if listeners got that feeling, but maybe, people think that we are talking at a policy level, or we are talking about charity, or we are talking about social sector, we are talking about think tanks. But guys, LabourNet is a company that is a for-profit organization. Gayatri, let's wind up on that. What's your business model? How do you do this and get a profit also?
So, as I say, we have revenue streams from each. So, those who payroll with us, we get a markup on that. Where there is what in today's world is called gig, where there is outsourced work there, we take a percentage of that. Whether it is in the education, where we do, like I said, in the plumber case, then the company pays us. So we look at the company paying us for us to do a service for them. So the service in this case being reskilling or upskilling. So we get paid by people to actually educate. Isn't that brilliant?
And I wish you all the very best. My God, if even half of the work that you do makes an impact, and I hope that 200% does, I think the labor force can be a very different story, and this country can look very different. So Gayatri, thank you so much for doing this episode of Paisa Vaisa. Folks, that is a wrap. I'm sure that you heard the last two parts because they were really important. Just recap them any which way. Start a recurring deposit, get health insurance, and give digital products to the people who touch your life in the informal labor segment. And if you're a startup, and if you're an MSME owner or whatever it is, look at housing, look at health, and look at associated factors. Gayatri, one last thing. Where can our listeners reach out to you? I mean, the credentials, which is the website and all the social media pages are all there in the episode description. But I don't know, maybe someone wants to reach out to you. What's the best way to do it?
The website would be the best way to do it.
Fantastic. And folks, with that is a wrap on this episode of Paisa Vaisa. My guest, Gayatri Vasudevan, CEO, LabourNet. Gayatri, really, thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
Thank you, Anupam.
And now, folks, the credit privilege tip of the week: recurring deposits. Yes, think of them like SIPs with your bank. These are nice and convenient ways to do tiny savings. Okay, check out the various options at your bank. Of course, typically they don't feature this very prominently, but they're interesting ways to inculcate a savings habit. Recurring deposits means keep on depositing a small amount of money in your bank, or could even be a large amount of money in your bank account month after month after month. Helps you in your savings habit. And that there is the credit privilege tip of the week. And listeners, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm your host, Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter. And thank you so much for listening to Paisa Vaisa.
No material on the show should be considered as financial advice. The material on the show is for informational purposes only. Please consult a financial advisor before taking any investment decision.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Agla Station Adulthood, Ritasha and Ayushi speak to Marissa Mays. She is the curator of No More Lonely Friends. They discuss toxic friendships and pandemic loneliness. Also, do check out Probation Se Promotion Tak with Abhinav Trivedi. He will help you make your CV stand out when you're looking for a job. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam and Soumya Shah, co-founder of Tarakki, discuss what the current trends are in the wealth management industry. On All Things Policy, the folks from the Takshashila Institute shed light on the implication of China's infrastructure building in Tibet. And on Tere Mere Raste, Keshav tells us about a small village in the Himalayas called Tirugi Narayan. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. We'd also really appreciate any ratings or reviews you can give us on any of the platforms that we're listening on, whether it's Apple Podcast, Spotify, or IVM Podcast app. Wherever you're listening, do let us know that you are listening. I'd also like to remind you all that we have a number of YouTube channels where a number of shows are available. You can go to ivmpodcast.com/YouTube to check out what channels we have. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Cred, Bank of Baroda, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intel. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Do you end up spending more time trying to be productive than actually being productive? No, this is not a personal attack. A lot of us actually face this. We spend more time pursuing productivity than actually working towards it. But how do you break out of this vicious cycle? My name is Ashton Doctor and I host the Habit Coach Podcast, a show on self-improvement, habit forming, and maintaining better routines. And it gives me great pleasure to announce that this show is now getting a Kannada adaptation as well. Do check it out every Monday and Thursday only on the IVM Podcast Network. Let's create an awesome life with our awesome habits.